The sun hung low over the wide Montana plain, painting the horizon in shades of gold and rust. Dust rose lazily from the boots of the guests gathered around the old ranch house, their murmurs blending with the restless whinny of horses tied near the fence. The smell of hay, leather, and wildflowers filled the air. It should have been a perfect day for a wedding, but for most people watching, it wasn't love that brought them here. It was curiosity. They had heard the talk. Everyone in Willow Creek had. Cole Harrington's marrying the fat cook from his ranch. It was the kind of gossip that spread like wildfire in a small town where nothing ever stayed secret. And now, standing beneath the wooden arch she'd decorated herself, Ella May felt every whisper burn into her back. She stood tall, or tried to. Her hands trembled around the bouquet of daisies she had picked that morning. Her dress was simple, cream-colored cotton with tiny pearl buttons she had sewn on by hand. The sleeves were tight at her arms, the waist a little snug, and every flaw felt like a spotlight in front of the staring crowd. The men stood with their hats in hand, eyes flicking between her and the path where the groom would appear. The women whispered behind fans and parasols, exchanging looks that said bless her heart while meaning something far colder. Ella's heart pounded. She could hear it over the preacher's quiet humming, over the shuffle of boots. What am I doing here? She asked herself. She could still leave, walk down the hill, disappear back to the kitchen where she belonged. But she didn't move. She couldn't. She thought of the long evenings in the ranch kitchen, when the fire crackled and the smell of cornbread filled the room. She remembered how Cole used to walk in after a hard day, his shoulders heavy, his hands rough from rope and work. He never said much, just nodded toward her stew and said, "Smells good." Sometimes he'd linger a moment longer than usual, watching her knead dough or set the table. Once, months ago, he had smiled after tasting her biscuits and said, "A man could fall in love with food like this." She had laughed then, shyly, and said, "Well, sir, maybe one day I'll find a man who's hungry enough." He hadn't replied, just looked at her for a long time, in that quiet, unreadable way of his. And now, somehow, that moment had led to this one. He'd asked her to marry him. Not with flowers or promises, just a simple sentence over supper. "You've kept this place running, Ella May. A man like me needs someone steady by his side. Maybe we should make it official." She'd said yes through tears. But the whispers came fast. People said he was marrying her for her cooking, for convenience, for pity. Some said it wouldn't last a month. Now, under the open sky, with everyone's eyes on her, those words echoed in her chest. Then the crowd stirred. He was coming. Cole Harrington walked up the dirt path with his usual slow confidence, the kind that came from years of running cattle and facing storms. His hat shaded his eyes, his shirt freshly pressed, though she could still see the dust on his boots. He stopped before her, his shadow falling over her small frame. For a long moment, neither spoke. The preacher looked between them, uncertain. Ella's throat tightened. She wanted to tell him how grateful she was. How she knew she wasn't the kind of woman men dreamed of marrying, not like the slim, laughing girls at the saloon. Her fingers dug into the bouquet as she whispered, almost too quietly, "I know, sir, no one marries a fat girl." A ripple moved through the crowd. A few gasps. Some faces turned away, others smirked behind gloved hands. Her voice trembled, but she went on, forcing the words through the lump in her throat. "But I can cook. I can clean. I can make a home. I can take care of you. I may not be what folks expect, but I can love you honest." The air went still. Even the wind seemed to hush. Cole didn't move for several seconds. He just stared at her, not with pity, but with something heavier, deeper. Then he reached out, his hand rough and warm as it lifted her chin. His eyes met hers, clear and steady. "Ella May," he said softly, but his voice carried through the yard, "don't you ever say that again." She blinked up at him, unsure. He turned slightly, his gaze sweeping across the gathered faces, the neighbors, the hands from the ranch, the same people who'd laughed behind her back. His next words were not gentle. They came sharp and strong, like a man who'd had enough of other people's talk. "I didn't ask this woman to marry me because she can cook," he said. "I asked her because she's the only person who stayed when I had nothing. When the ranch near burned down, when the cattle were gone, when every friend I thought I had walked away, she didn't." A murmur ran through the crowd, but no one dared interrupt. "She's the one who fixed the roof, cooked for 12 hungry men, and kept this place alive. She's got more heart than half this town put together. He paused, his gaze softening as it returned to her. I don't see what you see, folks. I see the woman who saved my life. Someone coughed awkwardly. A few heads lowered. The preacher shifted nervously but said nothing. Cole took the ring, simple, silver, plain, and slid it onto her shaking hand. His fingers lingered, firm and sure. And if anyone thinks I'm marrying her out of pity, he said, his voice rising, they can find their way off my land. The silence that followed was heavy. Then, slowly, the preacher cleared his throat and began to speak again, his voice trembling slightly as he read the vows. Ella could barely breathe. Her tears blurred everything, the faces, the horizon, even Cole's steady smile. When he leaned down and kissed her, it wasn't like in the stories. It was gentle, brief, but filled with something that shook her to her core, respect. The crowd didn't cheer right away. They just stood, watching, uncertain. Then one of the ranch hands, old Tommy with the limp, clapped his hands once, loudly. "'Bout time," he said, grinning. Laughter followed, awkward at first, then warmer. The tension broke. Ella May stood there, clutching Cole's arm as the last of the sunlight touched her face. The golden light shimmered against her hair, the air around her calm and sweet. For the first time, she didn't feel like the fat cook. She didn't feel small or ashamed. She felt seen. The wind carried the scent of wildflowers and wheat across the yard. Somewhere a horse neighed softly. Cole turned to her, his thumb brushing a tear from her cheek. "You're shaking," he murmured. "I'm not used to folks watching me," she whispered. "Let 'em watch," he said, smiling faintly. "Maybe they'll finally see what I see." And as he led her down the steps, the whispers died for good. The girl everyone had laughed at walked beside the man who saw her worth, and every step they took together felt like a promise that she would never walk alone again. The lamps burned low in the cabin, their golden light flickering over the rough-hewn walls. Outside, the crickets sang in the grass, and the moonlight poured through the window in a silver glow. The guests were gone, the laughter and music faded into the night, leaving behind a silence so still it felt sacred. Ella May sat at the small wooden table, still in her wedding dress. The hem was dusted with dirt from the yard, the lace frayed a little where someone had stepped on it, but she didn't care. Her hands moved slowly, kneading dough. For pie crust, her sleeves rolled up. She was humming softly, a tune her mother used to sing when she was little, before life had taught her to be quiet. She hadn't expected to cook on her wedding night. But old habits die hard, and when the last of the guests had left, her first thought had been to make sure Cole ate something warm. That's what she'd always done, taken care of others. The kitchen was the one place she felt steady, sure of herself. Everything outside of it still felt unreal, fragile as a dream. The door creaked open behind her, and Cole stepped in. He had changed into a clean shirt, his suspenders hanging loose at his sides. His hair was damp, and his boots were off. Something about that small, domestic sight made her heart ache. He looked more at peace than she'd ever seen him. "You know," he said quietly, leaning against the doorway, "I don't think I've ever seen a bride make pie on her wedding night." She smiled without turning. "I suppose most brides don't spend the ceremony worrying if the roast will burn." He chuckled under his breath. "I reckon not." She finished shaping the crust, brushing it with butter, and slid it into the small iron oven. Then she turned to face him, her fingers fidgeting with her apron. The laughter in her eyes dimmed a little. "I needed to keep my hands busy," she admitted. Cole crossed the room slowly, his boots soft against the floorboards. "Still nervous?" Ella looked down, brushing at the creases on her dress. "I don't know if nervous is the right word. It's just," she hesitated, then spoke the truth she'd been holding in since morning. "I don't understand why you said yes to me, Cole. I keep thinking maybe it's all a mistake. Maybe tomorrow you'll wake up and realize you could have had anyone else." Cole frowned, his brow creasing. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. "Anyone else?" he repeated. "Like who?" She laughed softly, but it wasn't a happy sound. "You know who. The kind of woman everyone expects a man like you to marry. Pretty, thin, well-spoken. The kind of woman who doesn't have flour on her sleeves." He watched her, saying nothing. She went on, her voice trembling. "All my life, people told me what I wasn't. Not graceful enough, not delicate enough, not the kind of woman men look twice at. I thought maybe if I learned to cook, to clean, to care for others, I'd earn my place in the world. But even then, they only ever saw what I looked like. Never who I was. Cole leaned forward, his forearms resting on the table. Is that what you think I see when I look at you? She didn't answer. He reached out, taking her hand gently. His touch was warm, grounding. When I look at you, Ella May, I see the woman who stood by me when this ranch was falling apart. I see the woman who fixed the roof when the storm tore half of it off. The woman who fed 12 men on nothing but beans and bread, and still found a way to make them smile. You kept this place alive when I didn't have the heart to. You think that's something a man forgets? Her eyes filled with tears. I just didn't think I was enough for you. Cole shook his head, his voice low but certain. You've been enough from the moment you walked into my kitchen. You just didn't know it yet. She bit her lip, her shoulders trembling. He stood then, moving behind her, resting his hands gently on her shoulders. His thumbs brushed along her collarbone, tracing the curve of her neck. I don't care what anyone says about you, he murmured. I don't care what they whisper in town. They don't know what love looks like. I do. It looks like this, like you, standing here, smelling like cinnamon and flour, trying to take care of everyone but yourself. She turned slightly, her breath catching. He was close. Now, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his blue eyes. Cole, she whispered, you don't have to say that just to make me feel better. I'm not. He smiled faintly. I've never said anything I didn't mean. The oven timer clicked softly. She turned, pulling the pie out with shaking hands, the sweet scent of apple and spice filling the room. He reached over, took it from her, and set it gently on the table. They sat again, and for a moment, neither spoke. Cole picked up the knife, cut a small slice, and slid it onto a plate. I never thought I'd get married again, he said quietly. When I lost Sarah, I figured that was it. I told myself no woman could fill that space. He looked up at her. Then you came along. You didn't try to fill it. You just built something new beside it. Tears slid down her cheeks, silent and steady. She tried to speak, but the words tangled in her throat. Cole reached over and wiped them away with his thumb. You've got to stop thinking love has a shape or a size, he said softly. It's not something you fit into. It's something that grows around you. The words broke something open inside her, a dam she'd built over years of shame, of hiding behind humor and hard work. She covered her face for a moment, sobbing quietly, not from sadness but from relief. When she finally looked up, he was still there, watching her with quiet patience. He lifted a forkful of pie and held it out to her. Here, he said gently. Taste it. She obeyed, taking the bite. It was sweet and warm, a little imperfect, too much cinnamon, maybe, but he smiled like it was the best thing he'd ever tasted. I reckon that's about the finest pie in Montana, he said. She laughed through her tears, shaking her head. You'd say that about anything I make. That's because everything you make has a little bit of you in it, he replied. And I'm partial to you. The room grew quiet again, filled with the hum of night outside. Ella reached across the table, taking his hand. Thank you, she whispered. For today. For standing up for me. He squeezed her hand gently. You don't have to thank me for telling the truth. They sat there for a long time, the air between them calm and full. The lantern light softened his face, the lines at his eyes, the quiet strength in him. She studied him, realizing she'd spent years loving this man quietly, from behind kitchen doors. And now, somehow, he had seen her, not just her work, not her cooking, but her. Outside, the wind stirred through the tall grass, carrying the scent of rain. Ella leaned her head against his shoulder. For the first time in years, she felt completely safe. After a while, she whispered, almost to herself, maybe it's true what I said once, that no one marries a fat girl. Cole turned, his lips brushing her hair. No, he said softly. A fool might not, but a wise man does. Because he knows she's worth keeping. She smiled through quiet tears, her hand resting over his heart, and as the last light flickered in the lantern, she finally believed him.